So far we've seen how we can pass data from the parent to the child component. So at this point we're doing app and we're passing some data to a number component. What we haven't seen is the other way around. And sometimes you might like for a child component to tell the parent component that something has happened. So we're going to communicate the opposite way, and we're going to see how to do that now. Before we do that, however, we're going to clean up a little bit. We have gotten our component to be quite large, and we can get rid of some of this code that we no longer need. I'm going to get rid of these two for now, and I'm also going to get rid of these checkboxes, so we're just going to have our numbers rendered. I'm also going to remove this computed property, we no longer need that. And I'm going to remove most of the values inside of data except for the numbers array. I'm also going to get rid of both of these methods because we no longer need those. I'm going to leave the methods key here, however. That's all for now. I'm going to save this one off and just make sure everything is still working, and so it is. The next thing we're going to do is update our number component. Instead of using a div, I'm going to turn this into a button. So we're going to be able to click on each of these numbers. And if we head back to the browser and refresh it, we can see that is still working. So what we're going to do is when we click on one of these buttons, we're going to have some way to communicate that from the child component, one of the buttons was clicked. We're going to communicate that to the parent. We're going to create a new array and then store the numbers that have been clicked. So I'm going to call that one clicked numbers, and it's going to start off as empty. And the aim is going to be populating this with any of the numbers that have been clicked. So we're going to have to find some way to communicate from the child component, in this case the number component, to the parent component. The first thing we're going to have to do is add a click listener in our template. So let's head up here and do this. We're going to use the @ mark and say @click, and this is going to listen for any clicks on the button. And when this is called, I'm just going to call a method called handleClick. Let's go ahead and define that method now. It's going to be called handleClick, and we need to have some way in here to tell the parent component which one was clicked. For now, I'm just going to console log this and make sure it's still working, and we can just say console.log this.number. Let's save that one off and see if it's still working. I'm going to click on this button, and you can see it is logging the number 1, and if you click on 2, 3, 4, it is logging all of those numbers correctly. The next thing we need to do is have some way to communicate from here to the parent component, and the way we do this is by saying this.$emit. And this dollar symbol shows methods that come with Vue by default, as opposed to custom ones that we define ourselves. The first argument is going to be the name of the event. In this case, I'm just going to call it clicked, for example, or maybe we can choose chosen, just to illustrate that you can use any value. It doesn't have to be a specific JavaScript event. And what we're going to do is leave that like that for now and delete this one down here. And now we need some way to listen for this event on the parent component. So what we're going to do is come down for our number component, and we're going to listen for that chosen event. And as you can see, the name of the event here that we're listening for has to match the one we have in the emit function here. Once we have that, we're going to pass in the function we're going to call. In this case, I'm going to call putInArray, and this is just going to pass that number into an array. So this is a new function as well. Let's go ahead and define that in our methods key. So we have this method called putInArray. It's going to take no arguments for now, and we're going to just do a console log to make sure everything is working and just say it works. Let's save this one off and see if it's working. So I'm going to head back to the browser now. And if we click on one, you can see it's logging it works. And if we click on some more buttons, it's logging the same thing, as you can see over here. So we have got some way to communicate, but we need some way to also pass the data, in this case, the number that we've clicked on. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. Let's head back to up to our chosen function. And what we're going to do is pass a second argument to this. And this can be any payload we like. It can be an object or a value. In this case, I'm just going to pass the number. So I'm just going to say this.number. And that's going to be the second argument here. Now, if we head down to where we're listening for it, we don't have to change anything here. This is going to work fine. And if we head down to putInArray, the first argument here is going to be the second argument to emit up on line 17. So it's going to be this value here. Let's go ahead and try this one out and see if it's working. So the first value here is just going to be the number, and I'm going to log the number in here as well. If we save this one off, head back to the browser and try it out, you can see this is now working. It's saying it works 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. So we have got some way to communicate not only that an event occurred, but the data associated with that event. The final step is just going to be placing this number into our clicked numbers array. Let's go ahead and do that. I can just say this.clicked numbers, and then we're just going to say push and push in the number. Finally, let's go ahead and render these to see if everything is working. So I'm going to put a new header in here, and we're just going to say clicked numbers, just so it's obvious which list we're looking at. And now we can reuse our number component. I'm going to copy this one down here, and instead of looping over numbers, I'm going to loop over clicked numbers, and that should be all we need to do. I'm going to delete this event because I don't want the numbers to be clickable in this array, and save this one off. Let's head over to the browser and see if this is working. And we haven't got anything there because we haven't clicked anything, but if I click on one of these numbers, you can see it's now creating the number. And let's go ahead and click a whole bunch more and see if everything is working. It is. Because we're not actually listening for any event here, if I click on this, nothing is going to happen. And that's perfectly fine. Just because an event is being emitted doesn't mean you actually have to listen or respond to it. And that's all you need to do to be able to communicate from child to parent. If you have something more complex rather than just a regular value, you can also pass an object. For example, I can say number is this dot number. And this is going to work perfectly fine as well. All we'd have to do now is change down here. And instead of getting a number, this is going to be a payload, which is going to be the object. And inside of there, we could just say payload.number, and that would let us access the number inside of that object. So this can let you send arbitrary numbers of values or objects from your child components to your parent components. Let's go ahead and make sure this is still working. I'm clicking on a bunch of numbers and everything still works as expected.